Welcome, action fans, and thanks for joining us for another edition of All 90s Action All the Time, as we continue our Val Kilmer season. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Murphy, and on this episode of the pod, we are going to be looking at 1993's The Real McCoy. Before we get into that, though, I need to introduce my regular co-host. Yes, you know exactly who it is. He is a screenwriter. He is 1/3 of the Bloodhound Picks podcast, and he is an incompetent would-be criminal looking to be taken under the wing of a crime legend. No, wait, actually, that's just Val's character in the movie. Got a little confused there. Anyway, it's Mr. Craig Joheim.
Yeah. Glad to be here. I could not find a line that worked, so and I watched the whole movie looking for a line specifically. I was like, come on, give me a line. Give me a line to use with this. Nothing.
Well, we'll talk about the excellent writing of this film much more as the episode goes on. So it's understandable, Craig. I understand your pain. Now, because we are not covering every 90s Kilmer film, here's a quick catch-up as to what else he was doing in 1993. As he also starred as Doc Hollywood in Tombstone, which you can hear all about in our Tombstone episode that we did in the Kurt Russell season, which was last season. And he also played what is called, the character is just called the Mentor, but you might know him as the kind of Elvis character in True Romance, which is a film that we probably won't cover because it's more of a crime film than it is an action film. But if you have not seen True Romance, I would definitely recommend that you do, because it is quite possibly Tony Scott's best film. Now, on to the background details for today's film, which was released on September the 10th, 1993. It was directed by Russell Mulcahy, who has directed many features over the years in horror and sci-fi and action. But the main thing you need to know about Mr. Mulcahy is that he directed Highlander, and that is awesome. And the film was written by William Osborne and William Davies. Who's Craig's laughing already. Who are the screenwriting duo who brought you Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. So make up your own mind as to as to what we might be in store for here. Review wise, it is currently sitting at a 5.5 out of 10 on IMDb. 22% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 18 reviews, no Metacritic score, and it has a 2.4 on Letterboxd. It did not do any better at the box office, as it was a complete dud, making a mere $6.4 million off of a $24 million budget. Also, according to its IMDb votes, 8.7 thousand, and the people who marked it as watched on Letterboxd, 2.5 thousand, it is the most obscure and least seen movie we have covered on the podcast, taking that title from Rapid Fire. Further solidifying this fact is that it cannot be found on streaming and is currently out of print on DVD, but is available free on YouTube, which is exactly where myself and my co-host watched it. So, Craig, once again, much like the Thunderheart episode last week, I hadn't seen this movie. I hadn't heard of this movie. Had you?
Well, first, I'll just say, Scott, that I think I'm going to have the delay like we normally do when I'm up here doing that. So just wanted to warn you on that. But, okay, so I had actually not seen this movie before, and I don't even know if I've heard about it. I mean, there's so many real McCoy titles that in my head I was like, oh, maybe I've heard of it at one point, but yeah, no, not at all. And yeah, I was trying to find it, and I was even like, well, maybe I'll just buy it because, to try and support and stuff like that. And yeah, even to buy it, it was very difficult. It wouldn't be here in enough time. So yeah, that is my only connection to real McCoy, that I was trying to buy it so that for this purpose.
Yes, I also looked into buying it, but then I realized that all the DVDs were like secondhand, and looking on Amazon, the DVD cost about £20, and I was like, no, real McCoy, I'm not forking out £20 for you. But thank you very much to the person who put it on YouTube, so we could still do this episode. Or, I mean, who knows? Maybe we shouldn't thank that person, given the movie is not great.
Yeah. And there's not enough Kilmer.
There's not enough Kilmer in this movie, unfortunately. Although, I reading about this movie, apparently this is one of the movies that Kilmer was not best behaved on the set. Apparently, there was a point where he was not happy with Russell McKay's the way he'd set up a particular scene, so he fired off his prop gun into a prop car in a kind of hissy fit. And I saw an interview, I read an interview with Russell McKay where he was talking about the movie very briefly. The interview was mainly about The Shadow, but he mentioned it and he said it was a tough shoot, and he mentioned that one of the actors, who he would not name because he didn't want to get in trouble, made Kim Basinger cry. And I can only imagine, because I don't think the likes of, Gaylord Sertain or, whatever is like a big enough name to be like, oh, I will not mention that person. I can only imagine he's not mentioned it because it's Val Kilmer. But maybe I am doing Val Kilmer a disservice.
I don't think so, because even if you look at like Terence Stamp or whoever, yeah, no, I agree. I think
because he deliberately mentions Terence Stamp as being like great to work with. Like he mentions that Kim Basinger was a delight, that Terence Stamp was a top pro, and like it was great to work with him. And then he says that. So I'm like, oh well, that's two of the three big stars in this movie talked about.
Yeah. It was the kid that played Patrick. He's the one that did it. It wasn't Kilmer.
The interesting thing about the kid is, I don't know if somebody on this film thought the kid was going to be like a big star at some point or whatever, but like in the credits, he is credited as like, and introducing Zach English. And yeah. But that kid didn't go on to, in fact, that kid ended up quitting acting and becoming an EMT.
That's probably more noble than being in the real McCoy.
So he did some, you can say whatever you want about him in this movie, but he ended up doing some real world good, so like, can't shit on him too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into this one, Craig. Let's not fuck about like we normally do. Let's get straight into it, and tell us how this one starts, Craig.
So this starts as we're seeing a city, which we come to find out is Atlanta, and then we kind of come to an Atlanta bank, and we see somebody breaking in. And the whole time, the way it's set up, everything about it, you're kind of, obviously, spoiler alert, you're assuming that based on all the other heist movies that it's a man, and they're breaking in and trying to get into the elevator, not by working the system, but by pulling the panel out and just burning all of the circuits, things like that. And then there even comes a scene where this individual opens up the ceiling and comes through, and the floor is lined with, the lasers that were very popular in heist movies, or still are. So they have to kind of crawl across the ceiling. But unfortunately, the alarm is triggered, and while they try to escape, they are apprehended by a police helicopter. And that jumps to 6 years later in a Georgia prison, and that's where we are introduced to Karen McCoy.
Yeah, can I was just going to say something just quickly. I did watch, I couldn't do much research for this one. The trivia on this on IMDb is there is no trivia. There is one piece of trivia, and it's not trivia. It's just basically saying like, Kim Basinger was in Batman, and Terence Stamp was in Superman, and Val Kilmer was played Batman. So they're all in DC. That's not trivia. That's just anyway. So there was just that, but I did find the Russell McKay interview, which mentioned it briefly. And also I found an interview on YouTube with Kim Basinger. And one of the funniest moments of that interview is like she was saying she really got into character when she wore that cat suit. That was what really got into the character and the mindset of the bank robber. But because it is a heist movie, and apparently she was a fan of Mission Impossible, when she was doing the scenes, she said like in the back of her mind she was humming the Mission Impossible theme tune to herself, which I'm so amused by just imagining Kim Basinger on set just being like dun 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 dun. I love it.
No, that's great. And I mean, it is very reminiscent of course, which would then become, the famous Mission Impossible scene. That is kind of known throughout all of the Mission Impossible movies. Yeah.
Yes, which would be 3 years after this. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's weird thing about this movie, I guess, before we fully get in, is that like the 90s had these amazing kind of heist films, and you realize that it does a couple of things that came before these films that then would make it iconic, like Mission Impossible or whatever, and would like really, I guess, like put a stamp on it. But then it came after it. These other one, I don't know. It's just kind of in the middle of all of these amazing heist films, and which also might be why it gets lost, because we're so much way better movies that came out before and after.
It just feels very generic. Have you seen any of and also like it steals things from much. I mean, this is kind of skipping to the end, near the end of the movie, but it steals things from much better heist movies. Like at the end, where they're doing the heist at the end, they use like a thermal lance, just like in Thief, and it's like, don't be referencing that. When you're this movie, you can't be trying to compare yourself to that movie, because that movie's great.
Yeah.
Also, like, kind of cutting back to the start of the movie, one of the weird moments of the start of the movie is that when Kim Basinger's character, Karen McCoy, gets her possessions back from the jail, and you're like, oh, it's played as this big thing of like, it's a woman, because you've maybe not seen the poster and you're way into the, cinema or whatever. Amazing. And then the prison guard, gives her stuff back, and then he says, before the facial reveal comes, is like, is this condom yours? And and then he says it's ribbed. And then she says, oh yeah, I must have been ahead of my time. And it's like, what, in 1987 were people not using ribbed condoms much? Like, I don't, like, what was going Right. Is she a trailblazer for ribbed condoms? Like,
Yeah. We need the answer. If somebody listening to this episode was buying condoms in 1987, let us know.
Please write in if you have this information. Yeah, we won't stay with that for too long, but I just thought I'd bring it up because I was like, that's weird. I don't know if it's like she's suggesting that she's a trailblazer to have ribbed condoms, or she's a trailblazer to just be a woman who has the condom. Like, usually the guy comes with a condom. Is that maybe what it is? Maybe she's a trailblazer. 1987 women didn't carry condoms, but she did.
I think so.
Yep. I probably thought about that too hard.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
But that's kind of the issue with, yeah. No, that's one of the issues, because it's supposed to be kind of like a more lighthearted, fun heist movie, and then it has tonal issues throughout, which I know we'll get into. But like, the character of McCoy, I don't know, is played. There's kind of this blandness about it, about the whole character, but then there's these moments of you're watching it going, oh, you could really kind of have fun with this a lot more than you are, or than anybody in this movie is actually having. Like, why isn't anybody having fun with this movie?
That's a fair point. And like, she seems in that kind of opening riposte to that prison guard, and then in the next scene when she's kind of being sleazed onto by a guy in the train, and she's just completely honest of being like, I was, that she was robbing banks and stuff like that, which scares the guy off. Like, both of those scenes, she's quite, a big personality, forceful, like, very much her own woman, kind of quippy, sarcastic, all this kind of stuff. And you're kind of like, oh, this is the character I'm getting. Okay, this is a strong female lead, quippy, yeah, okay. But then almost immediately after that, she becomes kind of this really soft-spoken and, kind of meek character. And you think she's just doing that initially as like an act, like when she first meets her parole officer, but then she kind of interacts with other characters in that way as well, where you're just like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird, because those characters like can't do anything to you, like put you back in jail or anything. Like, so then it becomes like this thing of like, oh, this is the character now, and the character is that for a while, until the third act, when she becomes kind of wisecracking and badass again. And you're like, oh, yeah, it goes up and down throughout the movie.
Yeah, I mean, well, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, obviously, anybody listening just listen to us talk about that episode. I don't want to rehash all that trauma, but obviously, I don't know, that one I think was more. was more consistent in terms of what, like, it was trying to be a comedy. Yeah, it failed about it, but yeah, I think that's my major issue watching this movie is that, like, Executive Decision, as much as we joke about that, it's, the ultimate 3-star movie that then is is forgettable. And that's, this one, it's like, while watching it, I was forgetting, I could even forget the scene that happened immediately before. It just ends up becoming like so kind of all over. And
yeah, like the Executive Decision comparison is interesting because this film is kind of bland and flavorless, whereas Executive Decision is kind of tense and interesting while you're watching it. It's just by the time you get to the end of the movie, like the next day, you'll be like, yeah, that was quite a good movie. I enjoyed that movie. I can't really remember much about it, but like, yeah, it was quite a good movie. Whereas this, it's just kind of like, completely forgettable. So like, the likes of Executive Decision is like an enjoyable, tense watch in the moment. It just doesn't stick with you for that long. Whereas this, it doesn't stick with you even while watching it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you get to meet Val Kilmer. It ends up becoming P.T. Barker, or J.T. Barker, sorry. And while
did you nearly say that you
a
ended up being P.T. Barnum?
I said P.T. Barker, but it's J.T. Barker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, J.T. Barker, that is correct.
Yeah. But he's trying to rob a convenience store, and he's obviously really bad at it. And, the clip is falling out. And because the clip falls out, the cashier is able to pull a gun on him, and basically leading to JT and like quickly driving away as, McCoy is kind of chuckling about it because of how horrible of a robber he is. But yeah, it's interesting again, because with that character, you think he meets up with her, again, going forward later, and you're expecting, oh, this is going to be where she's kind of training him or they're really working together. But that's kind of the end of that element. Next time she sees him, it's not like she's ever really taking him under her wing like you would expect with another type heist movie. You're just kind of like, oh, okay, so now he's a little more competent of a robber, I guess, but it's not really necessary. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he is completely incompetent throughout the movie. Basically, he is very much the comic relief. I like how Kim Basinger described it in her interview, where she's the guy and he's the dumb blonde, and I'm like, that's kind of true.
Yeah. Oh, and it's fun. I wish they leaned into that even more than they do. And I even like the fact that, obviously in Hollywood, you have two people, they'll be playing roughly the same age that they're supposed to, but you find out, the actor is 40 and the actress is, 25 or whatever it is. But in this sense, 2 years older, I think, than Kilmer. And so it, for that instant, being a 90s movie and an action film and having that's kind of, a weirdly unheard of thing, even though it might sound like, oh, well, that shouldn't be a problem at all, but especially at that time.
Yeah, that's true. I think, you're entirely right. That Kim Basinger is slightly older than Val Kilmer, Kim Basinger would have been 40 when this movie came out, and Val Kilmer would have been 34. Yeah, she's about 6 years older.
And I don't know. That's the hard part. Is obviously I'm trying to be optimistic before we get into this movie fully, and give it more of the benefit of the doubt, which you can't. But like, there's a lot of setup. Again, I'll repeat myself that they could have had a lot of fun with, and I think, like having, like, playing more into the fact that JT or into kind of, I don't know, it just, there is kind of a movie in there that could have been good, I guess, with different writers or whatever it may be. I'm going to pull out instance later when we get to the police officers with the bank that I haven't pulled out since early in the Stallone season of the movie that I'd rather watch, the side characters movie.
We've not had that in a while, so I look forward to that. But there is a few directions this movie could have gone, but it can't seem to decide which of those to actually do. So kind of so on the mini mart thing, like when he has the mini mart robbery, before we kind of move away from that scene, the thing I noticed was the kind of shop clerk, like his handgun is massive. I was like, what the fuck? Why?
Yeah.
I was like, that is more firepower than you require, my man. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say about that. It was just
yeah. No, so what we pretty much get after this point of the amateur is you find out that her ex-husband is now remarried, and she's asking about her son, but he quickly hangs up the phone, and he said he's going to meet her the following day to give her all of her belongings. And then you kind of get into that. You get into her needing to find a job, but she, meets her horrible parole officer, who's obviously playing the creep card, and he's, being rude to her about, well, why didn't you come in earlier, even though it was late at night, and I can send you back as quick as possible, and all this stuff. And while she's meeting the parole officer, that's when, again, we're finally kind of introduced to JT, who starts kind of fanboying out, basically, about McCoy. And he wants to basically be her sidekick says, I can be your driver. I can help you. And then he ends up, they kind of weirdly start partnering up just because she doesn't have any other option. The bus went off without her. And so, I can give you a ride to the place you need to go so that you can pick up your stuff. And that's kind of the relationship for a lot of it. And then even further, he helps her get an apartment, but then again, they're really not connected in any way at all. There's really no romance between, at least her to him. But yeah, that's just for about the first 30 minutes or so of the movie. That's basically it, is that he randomly is showing up, helping her and moving, I guess, the plot forward, but really, not really being of use as the character.
Yeah, that's very true. He's just kind of, he is just there as a sidekick, and there as to move the plot forward a little bit. But he doesn't fit into the film quite in the way you'd think he'd fit into the film. But then, that's because kind of after that point of like him asking questions and fanboying out, which is, I love how you phrased it like that, because that's exactly what I put in my notes as well. Like, it's, yeah, after that, and you're like, oh, right, okay, we're here, we're in this kind of trying to be fun, heist comedy, got you, I know where we are. But then, after that point, where he's asking questions, then you get a montage of Karen trying to find a job, and it kind of for a while becomes like this kind of criminal reform drama of her trying to reconnect with her son and trying to do good, and it almost becomes this totally different thing of like, oh, okay, well, we know there's going to be a heist later, because like that's because if you just look at the poster, you know it's like, this is a heist film, so we know we're going to get back into that at some point. But for a while, it's just, and it's really, there's plenty of meat there if there was better writers or whatever, but the way it's done here, it's just really drags.
Yeah. Well, and it even goes, later, the movie Heat, it's not even a major scene and not even a major character, but you think about, there's that whole, I can't think of his name now, but he gets out of prison, goes on parole, and then ends up working as a, like a dishwasher and cook
for
the restaurant, and then he ends up and it's this very small section in Heat that isn't really connected fully to the plot at all. And yeah, it does. That small section does a better job than this whole movie and dealing with it.
No, I would agree with that, absolutely. But anyway, we roll on with the film. We find out that Roy, Karen's ex-husband, is a complete asshole. Like, there is a scene with him talking to an accountant, and the accountant's like, well, I can't really, you're going broke, and I can't really do anything, we're getting this tax audit, it's going to be bad, man. And there's a bit where Roy, he saw the accountant's talking about the staff, and Roy goes, screw the staff. And then 2 minutes later, after it's like, you think like, oh, what an asshole, what a terrible boss. And then, just a couple minutes later, he informs Karen that he had told Patrick that she had died. And we're just like, well, fuck this guy.
Yeah. And the weird thing about, so in this scene, is, again, and it'll pop up in my notes several times, is that then Patrick comes up to the two of them while they're talking, and Patrick knew her up until he was 3 years old, and she was in prison for 6 years. But apparently he has no idea what his mom looked like at 3. Which, I don't know. Anyways, I won't get into all that, but I don't know. It's weird because there really isn't enough tension or enough riding on it throughout the movie for her not to tell Patrick that she's his mom. It never feels like, oh, well, she just can't because of blah, 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 these series of things. It's just, she says she can't because the script tells her not to. But
pretty much.
Yeah, the scene plays kind of awkward. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that is good in this scene is when Karen punches Roy and you're like, yeah, he deserved that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I noticed as well, like,
that's
the other thing that I noticed was that throughout the movie, most men that she meets, all men that she meets, are sleazy to her, and everybody comments that, like, that she hasn't lost her figure, Like, as if that's like a big surprise of like, oh, you kept your finger in jail. That's real impressive. Like the most impressive thing a woman can do.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know, and it becomes, and especially now that we're about to get into Terence Stamp, who is in kind of his introduction. Yeah, it's this big thing where you just really not, like he even looks at her longingly, and there's speculation that, well, did they have something before? And I don't know. Yeah, all the men in this give off very rapey vibes and creepy vibes, and that's basically what they're there for. Any interaction with her is that, except Kilmer's kind of, but even he, obviously, he's in love with her, but because he's in love with her career type of thing,
Yeah.
Again, fanboying out.
Yeah. He's clearly attracted to her, but not in a kind of creepy, sleazy way. The weird thing about it, kind of, is that even though the movie pushes back against that, the character of Karen, punches out Roy, and like she kind of talks back against some other men who are sleazy to her, including that early scene on the train where she scares the guy off by telling her she was a bank robber. There is other times where the movie and like her character like don't react to it, like every time somebody says like, "Oh, you've not lost your figure," like that never, like she never says "fuck you" to anybody or is sarcastic back. It just sits there, and then we move on to whatever else we're talking about. And it's like, and it kind of felt awkward each time because it's like you keep expecting her to be like, "Oh, fuck you. What's the matter if I kept my figure? I was in jail for 6 years, you fucking dick."
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, it just plays into the element. It's just, this movie, it feels like for a heist film should be longer, but then watching the movie, like there's so many lines in this that you could just cut because they're just throwaway. It's like, oh, you're just, again, like you were just saying, you have these lines talking about her figure that then just sit there, but they don't really move anything forward. They're just letting us know that it's Kim Basinger, who was kind of this, sex icon at the time, or sex symbol, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. What we didn't mention is about the introduction of Jack, of Terence Stamp's character, is at this point in the movie, because like he loses it later on in the movie, but at this point in the movie, as much as I admire and love Terence Stamp in many, many films, from Superman to Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and like loads of the Limey, I recently I rewatched that earlier on in the year. He's great in a whole bunch of things, but he is doing a truly, truly, truly terrible Southern accent.
I'm glad you say this, because my first thing I wrote about him, and I agree. I like him in the Limey. I love Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but I was like, man, and I kept like putting my ear to it and turning the TV up of like, is he doing a Southern accent or not? Because it keeps fading in and out. And it seems like he's unsure about doing it at times.
Oh, so
what is
yes,
going on here? I feel like there's moments where.
Yeah,
you could go.
I absolutely agree. So in this golf club scene, he is doing like a horribly corny, like, I'm a Southerner kind of like accent. But no, it comes in and out, and like by the end of the movie, he's clearly given up on it. By the third act, he's clearly given up on it, and he's just like Cockney by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
At the start of the movie, he's all kind of like, actually, I'm just in real estate now. And by the end of the movie, he's like, I'll fucking get you.
Yeah.
He's like the limey by the end of the movie. He's like, I was terrible at this all along. Probably shouldn't have bothered.
Yeah. Well, because obviously, as everybody knows, that Georgia is right next to, inner city London or whatever. They're like they're the same region basically.
Yeah, they're real close. The West End of London and like, or the East End of London and Atlanta, they're really just border each other, really. So lots of Southerners and Cockneys mingling. So that's how he's got that weird accent. Talking about Georgia, because I always think of Kim Basinger as a very Hollywood actress, I did not realize that she was born in Athens, Georgia, and is Southern.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Yeah.
So there you go. It's just one of those weird things. She just seems very California, is actually Southern. Just like Burt Reynolds, born in Michigan, but, I always thought, like, Georgia, because he's the most Georgia man. When you watch all his films, and then you find out not actually a Southerner. Amazing.
Yeah.
Films lie to us, Craig. That's what happens.
Yeah. If we've learned anything from the real McCoy, it's that films and actors are liars.
They're all liars. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I can't even remember. Oh yeah, no, right. Yeah, I know where we're at. So we cut forward. Jack's apparently not interested. He's in real estate now. And so like when JT comes over to him, he says, "No, I'm not planning anything. Don't bother with this, Karen McCoy. I'm legit." But then just after that, because clearly he still is in criminal enterprise, one of his henchmen, played by Rainer Shine, who's one of those character actors who just pops up in loads of things, but like, you always recognize his face, but you don't know his name. Like, I had to look up on IMDb. I was like, I know that guy. I've seen that face before. He threatens Karen, but then he swiftly gets a knee in the nuts, and that's kind of deals with him, and she just walks away. And then, after that, like,
as she's watched,
you go, Craig.
Oh no, you keep going. Oh no, I was just saying, no, it's just funny because, she's sitting there watching Patrick for the whole time, and it's just so quick. Again, going into maybe this being kind of lighthearted and more slapstick, but it's not even like there's a threat about the fact that he's showing her that he has a gun and is pulling a gun on her. She just handles it, throws the gun away, and then just walks off.
For sure. I think that's one of the many problems in the movie is like there doesn't seem to be any stakes. It all seems kind of so low stakes that it's like, oh, I mean, she's going to win. She's clearly the smartest person in this film, and the most capable person in this film, and she can run rings around all of these characters, so I don't feel like, there's just no threat there.
Yeah, even when we get to the ending, and there's, not to spoil all of it until we get to that point, but there's a twist, which you can kind of see coming at the end. And you're like, wait, none of the characters in this kind of heist movie were expecting this twist. And then I don't know, it just plays so quickly. Yeah, and obviously we'll talk about more when we actually get to it, but
Yeah. But we'll cut back into where we are in the movie. We might have lost track a little bit, but I'm back. I'm back and right in my notes of where we are. JT takes Karen on a kind of quasi date where he's like, "Oh, I know this really cool restaurant that is just the best restaurant, and you need something to eat, don't you?" And then we cut to it's an alright gag. We cut to like a cheap kind of diner is what we cut to, where they're eating hot dogs and fries. Although I did notice on the back wall of this diner there was a sign that said "the best hot dogs in Atlanta." So I don't know if this is a false claim, but maybe this is not as low quality as we think it is, because apparently it's got the best hot dogs in Atlanta.
So I will say, as somebody that comes from Michigan with Coney dogs and, has gone to Chicago, with the hot dogs there, I have never heard of Atlanta being known for hot dogs, but that could just be me.
Yeah, even as somebody from the outside in Scotland, it's not, because I know that Chicago is famous for the chili dog and stuff like that, right? Am I wrong in that?
Chicago has. We're gonna get into hot dog talk. Damn you, real McCoy. No, Chicago has this. I forgot. Their hot dog has relish, I think peppers and tomato or some. There's a certain type of Chicago dog. I know Michigan, It's the Coney dog, which is chili, onions, and mustard. There's each for some reason.
Oh, is the chili dog more of a Michigan
each
thing?
Each state has this is the best hot dog. Sometimes, but then other states have them too. I don't know. It's weird.
Okay, cool.
Hot dogs are a weird topic of yeah.
Okay. Now this movie is so gripping. We're talking about hot dogs.
Yeah.
Dear. We'll roll on forward. So after that point is when basically Karen is fired from her job, and because they find out that she's an ex-con, the person who hired her for the job put in their application that she was just self-employed to kind of do her a favor, but then the boss found out while checking the social security number. And then, the parole officer, who I'm not sure if we mentioned, is played by Gaylord Sartain, who was also in Stop or My Mum Will Shoot, and was also in The Patriot, so it hasn't starred now in 3 of her seasons. And he is being sleazy to her again and kind of blackmails her into having a date for drinks. And he drives her out to a big house. Sorry, Craig?
Yeah. I'm here.
Oh, I thought you wanted to say something there.
Oh, no.
Okay. So the parole officer, Gary, drives her out to a big house, and wouldn't you know, the house is owned by Jack, Terence Stamp's character. And if you did not see this coming, you have maybe not watched a movie before?
Yeah. Well, and then up until that, our JT also brings up Jack, which then she says for JT to never talk to her again and all that. But the way JT brings it up is that more of that he's naive about it, because he's like, oh, these are good people to work with. It can help get you money. And when she says that, Jack's the reason I even went to prison, then, he didn't know anything about it. So he's kind of, they show him as that he's weirdly innocent of it, even though, he is
even
still
though he's kind of
that
related to Jack, because he's like a nephew or something.
But Jack doesn't like JT at all. Yeah.
But then we are at Jack. Oh, that's another thing I was going to mention. The scene in Jack's house, when it's kind of really, oh my goodness, it's Jack's house. When he is talking to Karen, just before he starts talking to Karen, there is another woman there who's a young woman, and we're supposed to think that she's some sort of gold digger hussy because she's dressed like that in the way that movies think that gold diggers dress. And then basically Jack is incredibly rude to her and throws her out, because in 80s and 90s action films, to prove that your villain is villainous, he's either incredibly rude to a woman or is physically violent with a woman, just for kind of no reason other than being like, God, this guy's evil, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, and obviously one of the most famous ones of that is kind of satirizing it is RoboCop with the line, "Bitches leave," and so
yeah,
but that's what it feels like in this with this movie too.
Yeah, absolutely. But this movie does it unironically, and you're just kind of like, yeah, really, guys, screenwriters, man, have more imagination. Of like, there's other ways to prove that your villain is an asshole or he's really evil or whatever, other than him just being abusive to women. It's whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway. Moving
they should
on.
Make
back to the
a
plot.
movie where the villain is like just the nice. So they should make a movie where the villain is just incredibly respectful to women. And that's like he's just the kindest person to women.
Yeah, maybe. Like Peter Fonda's character in The Limey, he's quite decent to like the person he's going out with.
Yeah. See, there we go.
There we go. Well done, Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah.
All the acclaim that Steven Soderbergh has got over his career is nothing compared to the praise he has just received on this podcast, which I'm sure he is thrilled about.
Yeah. We should get on to his next movie poster or on his autobiography.
Well done, Steven Soderbergh, says all 90s action all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Okay. Enough fun and laughter. Let's get back to the movie.
Yeah. Okay, so what we find out is that she ends up declining and leaving, and then that she gets a call from Roy saying that, or with Roy saying, asking, or no, Roy comes to her house. He barges in and he's upset with her and saying that why would she take Patrick? And it turns out that somebody came to the school, because obviously this is the 90s when this was possible, because schools didn't have, apparently safety procedures for their children. That somebody just came in saying that she was Patrick's mother and took Patrick from school. And so that leaves basically McCoy off trying to find where Patrick is at, and she ends up breaking into, Jack's house, and goes through it and doesn't really, all she finds is that, somebody's watching porn and Jack is watching, I think, a Western or something.
He's watching Scarface.
Patrick isn't there, and then she breaks him. Yeah.
No,
there we go.
Because that's what criminals do. They watched, Jack is like it's like an episode of Cribs. He's just sitting watching Scarface.
Yes. And then so she ends up breaking into her parole officer's house, and for somebody that is such an amazing kind of thief, and I don't know, she is a horrible person at breaking into houses, because she makes it so there's the one place she busts the window with a brick. She breaks open the door with the crowbar. It's like she is not stealthy at all in this, but she finds out that the parole officer is at his cabin in, a little bit outside of the city near some lake. And so she drives out that way, which then, luckily for the script and for her, there happens to be in the middle of the night in this kind of, rural town, an older man where he lives.
Yes, an elderly guy who works at the petrol station, kind of petrol pump attendant, is there, because this guy, he pumps petrol 24 hours a day, clearly. And, he's there to be like, oh, Gary. Yeah, Gary just lives down the road. That's my terrible Southern accent, which, to be fair, is no more terrible than Terence Stamp. So I think I get away with it.
Yeah. No, I actually think your Southern accent is better than Terence.
Well, thank you, Craig.
Yeah. But yeah, she ends up watching the house, and then goes over to the house, breaks in with a brick, and then ends up finding Patrick, who's just kind of laying on the bed, and he's not even really, at no point talks about he likes being a hostage. He just apparently gets to watch TV and not be in school and whatever. But she gets to the car that is a horrible car, for obviously script reasons. And at that same time, the same, gas attendant who was working last night is somehow working in the morning to tell Gary that a woman was looking for Gary and went out to his house.
Again, because the plot says so. I think the thing I find most hilarious about this scene, and the thing I really like about this scene actually, is that I've put in my notes that Patrick knows his dad's an asshole, because there's a couple of lines where he's like, oh, was there a ransom? And Karen's like, no, and he's like, oh, good, because dad's broke. And then the car breaks down, and he's like, oh God, it's not one of dad's cars, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, and the car happens to break down, just enough time so that they could be right on the road when Gary is pulling up to them. They didn't get far at all.
No, they didn't get far at all. But the thing I wanted to mention about that actually was, so I found this scene quite jarring. So as we kind of talked about, there's been these different tonal shifts of it's kind of like a sad mother-son drama. Oh, it's this light-hearted crime caper, you know, like, and it's kind of gone back and forth between these two things of like crime caper and you know, more relationship, you know, drama, you know, whatever. And that's kind of weird. And then this scene's like really jarring because it's generally had this light-hearted tone, and then Gary just beats her up. And I'm not saying that he like slaps her across the face and then drags her into the car or whatever. He like full-fledged punches her in the face like 2 or 3 times and then kicks her in the gut. And you're like, Jesus Christ, movie, shit just got real serious and I don't know where this came from.
Yeah. No, I agree. Fight later. I don't know. It just everything with Gary is playing, like you already said, in a different movie because he like hits her several times and it's not even played even like when she kicks or knees the other guy in the nuts, or there's other fight moments where it still has that lighthearted fight element. But no, this is like full on. It's just a complete shift. The fight style changes. They make sure that you see blood. Like, yeah. It's a hard watch for that part.
Yeah. Because like you say, I mean, there's total comedy, when she punches Roy in the face, that's played for laughs. And then when she knees a guy in the nuts, that's played for laugh. And even when like the mini mart attendant like pulls a gun out on JT and like starts shooting up his car, that's obviously, you know, played for comedy as well. But like this moment just comes out of nowhere and it's played way more seriously and it's way more nasty than the rest of the movie. And you're just like, why does this exist?
Yeah. I mean, all it really does is because he already has a gun. So the scene, he could have just, to capture and take her back to Jack, he could have just held her up because she doesn't carry guns, as she already discusses. But, that could have just happened. Like he holds her at gunpoint, then takes her. And for some reason, like they have to have the scene where he knocks her out to take her to Jack.
Yeah.
Which then Jack is kind of weirdly nice about. Like Jack, as we'll get into it in just a bit now, like Jack lets her stay at the house. He's really nice with Patrick as his hostage. He's like, it seems like Gary is just going off on his own doing these things.
Yeah, very much so. It feels kind of off. But so after that, like the kind of the blackmail is in, and like she's on it now. She's got, you know, like it's this one last job, generic plot device, and so she agrees to you know do the bank job. It, like, as much as we're kind of shitting on this script because I think it deserves it, there is a couple of funny moments, and one of them kind of comes up, you know, just after this, where, you know, Karen is like, wants JT to be her driver. So goes to visit JT at his house, and we find out that JT has been stealing Betamax players, and she's like, well, nobody uses Betamax players, and JT retorts that, well, they do in Nigeria. Apparently, Nigeria is the Betamax capital of the world, which is a line that I genuinely chuckled at. Not many lines in this movie I was like, oh, that's funny. But like, that was one that I was like, oh, that's quite good.
Yeah. No, and I wish, because up until like that point when she goes to get him, that like she's not really, or he's not really there, as we kind of talked about. He's just kind of in and out of the movie. He pops up occasionally to move the plot forward. But during scenes like that, with him in the convenience store or whatever it may be, you're like, again, like there is a fun movie to be had if you let them kind of be together more or something. But it just doesn't give us enough of it, and it doesn't really happen for them to like have that banter back and forth.
Yeah. And one of the weird things as well is, like, there's not actually, coming up is one of the few scenes that I think is genuinely exciting. Like one of the only scenes that I think is genuinely exciting. It's like it's got a kind of a tension to it, and it's, well, maybe not a tension, but just like a funness to it, and a real zip to it that the rest of the movie doesn't have. And that's when JT and Karen are kind of checking out the time of how long it will take security to get from where they are to the bank, for because they're now trying to plan the bank job, and they want to figure that out to how quick they'll get there for the call. And JT's ripping through the streets, and it's shot quite excitingly, and it's all, and he nearly runs over a homeless guy, and it's all quite fun. And it just has more energy to it than like any of the other set pieces. And it's just like, and it's not even, there's not really tension to it because there's nobody trying to get them or anything like that. But it's just got more pizzazz than pretty much anything presented on screen, I think.
No, I agree completely. I mean, that is, while watching the movie and that happening, I don't know, it was like the first 30 minutes of the movie felt really long. It just kept feeling longer and longer, and then that happened. Like, oh, this might be okay. Maybe it was a slow, rocky start, but it's going to turn around now because this part's actually really fun. And but it's the peak. Then it goes back downhill. There's another part in, as part of the bank heist itself that is, it's a fun element. They kind of, it goes a little bit long, but obviously we'll get into that when we do. But no, I agree with you that I think it's fun, and it's because it's a complete downpour, and you're seeing them just kind of rip through the empty streets at night of Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think is possibly one of the weirdest things about this movie is that you can say whatever you want about the films of Russell McKay in terms of like the quality, it's up and down. Like I love The Highlander, whatever movie it is, whether it's a good movie, bad movie, whatever. Like throughout his career, he directed the first two Highlanders, he directed, The Shadow, he's directed a bunch of other things. I've not seen Razorback or Ricochet. They're supposed to be good. I have seen the likes of Silent Trigger as well. But all the Russell McKay films that I've seen, apart from this one, because of his music video background, are really highly stylized and really kind of memorable visually, even if it's not an amazing movie. Generally, they've got that. And this is the least stylish Russell McKay film I have seen. Yeah.
Well, it's probably one of the least, because I didn't realize it was the same director as Highlander. And I even think about, I mean, people don't necessarily, Highlander has so many kind of iconic scenes and moments and quotes and whatever, but even that, thinking about that stadium shot where it was all getting all technical now, but that dolly shot where it's just one complete shot going through the stadium and up the stairs and everything. And I mean, it's just the way it's shot. Yeah, it's incredible. And like, I wouldn't think it was the same director at all from watching this movie. Like, I thought for some reason, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those where it's like a kind of, like we had with maybe Stop Where My Mama Shoot or whatever it was, where like, oh, here's this kind of one-time director that then maybe did a couple TV episodes after that, but it's been that's been their career.
Yeah, I know what you mean, or one of those kind of very workman-like directors. Like, Roger Spottiswoode, who did Stop Where My Mama Shoot, it's very, he's very workman-like. I mean, I quite like the Bond movie he did, Tomorrow Never Dies, but he's not necessarily highly regarded or anything. He is just kind of those kind of on-the-job kind of, goes and does his thing, and he's not known for a particular style or he doesn't have a particular aesthetic or anything. Whereas again, he might be like a kind of B movie director. He might not be the most critically regarded director, but he certainly has a style. He has a particular aesthetic you kind of recognize, or certainly I've seen the first two Highlanders, I've seen The Shadow, I've seen Silent Trigger. Like these movies, they have a certain style to them, a certain aesthetic that you're like, oh, okay, but this movie is just kind of visually very bland and flavorless.
Yeah, I agree.
So basically, after getting our one bit of excitement,
yeah. Then we get into her where she's kind of doing the grifting, right? Or where she's
she's
this
doing
is
the
what
grifting in the back.
I guess while I was forgetting. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, I was forgetting while watching the movie. While watching the scene, I'm instantly forgetting what is happening as I'm just writing it down, because I know it keeps kind of jumping back and forth, because this grifting scene it's like several steps where she goes in to look at the bank vault, then she goes in to open a savings account to get more information, then she goes in to open a checking account to drop off the remote control thing, and JT goes in at one point to drop off something, which we'll get into. And as during that time, we're also getting these kind of scenes where, like, you see JT, Patrick, and her just having a blast at Jack's house, where they are technically hostages and shouldn't be having fun, apparently, but they're spraying each other with hoses or playing with each other in the pool, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of particularly ridiculous when the scene where JT is talking about his car to Patrick, and basically we get some kind of American propaganda of like, the American muscle car is the best car that man has ever created. He doesn't say exactly that, but that's basically the message he's given us. So apparently this movie wants a bit of American car propaganda for you there. And then he's like spraying Patrick with the hose, and then it becomes like this kind of family day out. We're kind of like, oh, okay, we're on vacation now. This is like hanging out at Jack's.
Yeah. Yeah. And every time there's one of those scenes, then you see Jack like in the background or whatever, just staring at her and staring at them, and you think, oh, something more sinister is going to happen. This might be building. Maybe he's going to double cross her, stuff like that. It doesn't lead anywhere, obviously, but
no,
we're supposed to get the feeling like, yeah, he is.
Because this is one of the truly terrible things about the movie. Jack is a really weak villain, and Terence Stamp puts in this really quite low-key performance that I think he's supposed to be. I think he's aiming for sinister, but it just comes off as kind of bored.
Yeah.
The other thing that I liked about this sequence
No,
as well.
I agree.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to mention about this sequence is that just before the scene where with the water hoses and stuff, there's like a little computer montage where Karen is working at the computer, and we see all these numbers, and she's cracking codes and doing all this, and up until this point, like, she's worn sunglasses a bunch, but at no point did we think she was a glasses wearer for her actual eyesight. But when she's doing this computer scene, suddenly she's got these big geeky specs on that you're like, she's intelligent now because the movie is telling me she's clever because she's got the big geeky specs. So I know she knows stuff.
Yeah. No, I had the same feeling about it, because then it's weird because during the heist part, anytime she's using like the computer stuff in the heist, the glasses somehow are magically on, but then aren't during everything else.
Yeah. They're basically just on for this computer montage, and they're on for the classic heist movie scene that every heist movie has to have, where a group of people stand over a blueprint. And usually this is one of the high points of a heist movie, and this movie fucks it up. It just makes it like, this is usually where you get the meat of the characters, and there's the height of the kind of quippiness and all that. This is your classic Ocean's 11 type moment. It's very bing bang bomb, there's slick lines coming left, right, and center, and it's just like, a couple of people query Karen about the logic of her plan. She then explains that the logic of her plan is sound, and then everybody kind of goes like, oh, well, 18 million, that sounds quite nice. Yeah, I think we'll go with that plan. And you're like, God damn it, movie. This is the scene that you really needed to nail. You're a heist movie.
Yeah. Well, and then it introduces us to these kind of the crew, the heist crew or whatever, that we've never seen up until this point except a couple of them. And now they have these lines and they're like chatting with her and all going back and forth, and have this kind of rapport that seems like they've been, again, like, as you were saying, like in Ocean's 11, where they've been all working together to figure this out, and now they have it fully solved. But no, you're like, wait, who are these guys? They just popped up, and they're just here to ask her questions so that she'll explain what they're going to do for the script's sake.
Yeah, because she has planned everything, and she's done everything for the plan to work. They've not set up anything. They weren't part of like the kind of this back and forth of like going back and forth into the bank. We've never seen them before, apart from Rain of Shine's character, and like Jack himself, and we're just like, yeah, well, so these characters have not been established at all. We do not care about them. Clearly, they're not important because Karen has already done everything. She has already done everybody's job. So we're not even sure why we specifically need these characters. And even actually at the end of the heist, we're still not entirely sure why we need these characters. This heist could have been carried out by Jack, JT, and Karen herself. Like, it really, the other people, entirely superfluous, but yes, just so we can have the classic blueprint scene, we needed more bodies for that.
Yeah. Because, I agree. Because even watching the heist, obviously we're about to get into it, but watching the heist itself, you're kind of like, so like, really there's no part that requires a one person doing something at a time. It's like, okay, unlatching the door and then kind of relatching it to make it look like there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, now drilling through the vault which only takes one person and the rest are just sitting around. Yeah, there's never a scene where two people have to be doing something at the same time or anything. It's just all, they're just kind of there.
Yeah. Yep. So, yes. So, like, Karen, Karen opens the checking. I've looked at my notes. Karen opens the checking account. This is the final part of the plan. She plants like a kind of little remote control car under a bin, where she is opening a checking account, which happens after the blueprint thing. And so yeah, this is kind of when the bank heist kind of kicks off. Like basically, Jack searches Karen. They're all dressed up. Jack searches JT and then searches Karen, even though she doesn't carry a gun, and everyone knows she doesn't carry a gun, but he wants to search her anyway because apparently his mum told him not, or somebody told him not to trust women. He doesn't trust women. Is what the case is.
Yeah.
And then Gary reappears because, apparently somebody has to babysit Patrick. So that is going to be Gary. And then we move on to them taking over the security place. And I thought this was quite funny because, like, Jack knocks at the door and we see that the security guard is a wrestling fan, because he is in the middle of watching. The interesting thing about this is, even though WCW, his headquarters, was in Atlanta, Georgia, he's watching WWF. He is, which is I'm not sure about that. Maybe presumably they just got the rights to WWF or something. But that seems, I feel like that seems inaccurate. I'm sure if somebody was in Atlanta, they might be more likely to be watching WCW. But anyway, that's just the wrestling talk. The last thing I'll say about the wrestling is, if you are a wrestling fan and you're thinking like, but what wrestling was he watching? He was watching a match between Crush and the Repo Man. But that's all on the wrestling chat, man.
Yeah. Well, no, and I like, actually. So there is one thing that I want to go back on that I realized, again, it goes with kind of that fun element that makes you believe there's going to be more twists and turns than there actually are. But JT even goes into the bank to drop something off in the vault himself, and we kind of know what's going to be coming with it. But like when he comes out, Rainer Schein is there asking, like, well, what are you doing in the bank, basically? And he says, it's that fun element saying, well, I wanted to close out my account. I had $150 or something in my account.
$156 it was.
Yeah. When we're going to be taking 18 million from it, it's like, yeah, but I didn't want you to have to split up my 156.
Yeah, again,
within the 18 million.
Yeah, because again, Val Kilmer gets the best lines in this film, and the kind of few funny moments in the movie.
Section 2 that they already explained.
So we're into the heist now, Craig, and we basically they take over the security office place. They tap into the bank security cameras so they can change the cameras so it looks like there's nothing on them. And then Karen uses the remote control bin to set off the alarm, and the police come to kind of search the bank and find that there's nothing there. They do this a bunch of times. We see this in kind of real time. It seems like they said, so they do this like 3 times, and we kind of see it each time, and it's kind of like, all right, okay, this is going on quite a long time.
No, I agree. Yeah, and it's already explained during the kind of blueprint exposition scene. So every time they set off the motion sensor alarm, then they do a little bit more. Then they make it look like nothing's wrong, leave, set it off again. The cops come, the cops leave. They do a little bit more, and it keeps just doing that until, finally the cops are thinking, well, just the machine's just broken. And so they go to, which means they have to sit there and stay for the remainder of the night while, they're basically stealing the money from under them. The cops are don't suspect a thing.
Yeah. And this is part of the problem
going into it, and then we watch it.
I feel like this is part of the problem of the movie as well, because like the cops who are there, who like stay, or are like, so after the 4th time there's a false alarm, that's when the 3 cops are like, oh, it's in the rules, now we have to stay overnight. Now, the problem with this is, like, these are 3 clearly Keystone cops, and it also feels like, oh, Jack can be easily double-crossed. So it means there's a real lack of tension throughout this kind of heist sequence of just being like, well, I feel like it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's again, I hinted at it in the beginning, and I'm bringing back the segment of watching a movie and wanting to see the movie focus on somebody else.
I know which character now.
Because you have these 3 cops kind of, you have these 3 cops kind of bickering with each other and not really listening, and they're just, and I was like, oh, this is actually more entertaining than the actual heist, which is supposed to be, so much fun. And here I am, just like, oh, yeah, I'd rather just watch these cops kind of bicker with each other, which says something about the heist more than does the cops.
That is true, because like there's 2 like kind of really fun moments with these cops where, like, first of all, when they're called out, they're kind of complaining like, oh god, 4th false alarm this night. And then like they come to the bank, and the same guy who complains about that is talking to the other 2 cops, and he's like, putting his feet up, and he's like, hey, so who's getting the coffee then? And both of the other cops kind of just sardonically look at him, and it dawns on him, oh right, I'm getting the coffee. And then that same character again, like there is a little hiccup in, somebody kicks one of the wires loose. So the real video of them in action, like doing the robbery, pops up. And then he's like, he sees that and then runs to tell the other 2 cops, and one of them comes through, but that time the wire is being put back in, so that it just looks like nothing is happening on the screen. So then we get this kind of fun interaction of like, oh yeah, the disappearing robbers, and so I can understand you wanting to watch these 3 characters more than the rest of the movie.
Yeah. Okay, I'm glad I'm not alone in this.
Not at all. I want to see these Keystone cops like not solve more mysteries. They're just the most incompetent.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Because they're not even like, I'd like that of being like the kind of running theme of their movies, that they're not even like incompetent on the level of like a Clouseau and accidentally stumble across the answer. They're like so incompetent that they're just like the crimes just pass them by.
Yeah, no, I like that idea.
They make Clouseau look like Sherlock.
Yeah.
But then Then we have to cut back to the
where
actual movie that's going
real
on.
fun is at. But yeah, so they are drilling through the vault, and they get through again pretty easy. They crack the safe code with all the computer, again, pretty easy. And then they go into the vault and they start kind of taking the money. They take a couple bags out, and then she asks secretly JT to tell her which kind of safety deposit box was the package he put in at. So she opens it up. It reveals that it's a gun, which she takes out, and you're kind of like, Jack, all of them, nobody's suspecting a thing, obviously, because why would they? And they all stay behind they're all kind of taking the money in the other section of the vault, which then she uses the remote to shut the gates, trapping them inside the vault with her and JT on the outside. And again, I don't know, you saw the double cross coming. There's really no tension about it.
Yeah, it's true.
I
love how relaxed this heist is, because so as we mentioned, the drill they use is like this kind of thermal lance, just like in Thief. But obviously in Thief, that's a highly intense sequence. You can, you practically, sweating watching it. You're on the edge of your seat. And this, you're not on the edge of your seat at all, because one, it's so easily done, and two, we kind of keep going back to looking at Karen and JT, and JT obviously thinks it's a picnic because he has brought coffee. He's just like, so they're just like back there with Karen's computer, sipping some coffee, like it's a day at the beach, and there's just no tension to it at all. You're not. Yeah, you're laid back in your seat. You're nowhere near the edge of your seat.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
I also love that JT is shown to be completely incompetent throughout the movie, and the only thing he can do is drive, because he doesn't remember anything, because he had to write the number of the safety deposit box on his arm, and then also he didn't load the gun. So he's just it's a wonder that Karen even puts up with him, to be fair.
Yeah. No, and that's, again, one of the other few funny moments is she's yelling at him about not loading the gun. He treats it in such a straightforward way of well, you didn't tell me to load the gun. You just told me that you get to buy the gun or something like that.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier...
So... you can go.
Oh, I was just going to say, as we mentioned earlier, by this point in the film, Terence Stamp has completely given up on the southern accent, and he's just when he's shooting the gun at Karen, he's just like, "I'll get you! I will get you!"
Yeah.
Again. Oh dear.
Yeah, they don't get any of the money, and they just run out, which JT again gets shot, which is something that doesn't hold any weight, because it's like he's shot, you see that he's bleeding, but then it doesn't really pop up again, and he's perfectly fine. And then they gas the three cops, and they escape, and then they head to Jack's house to get Patrick.
Yeah, and I suppose this sequence is quite fun, even though, again, the way everything happens is so obvious. So, JT rams Gary's car. They've got a van. JT rams Gary's car with the van through a fence. And you're like, oh, well, we've seen earlier a couple of times that Jack owns a tiger. So clearly he's been rammed into the tiger enclosure. And then, obviously, like a scene or two later, we see like Gary confronted by the tiger as if it's like a surprise. Like, oh right, yeah, remember the tiger? Yes, of course I remembered the tiger. You pointed that out a few times. It's clearly where this would. It just makes sense. Like, I've seen movies before. Again.
Yeah. Well, and so the tiger lunges at him, but you don't see anything else. You just assume that it got him or he's dead or whatever. And then they search through the house looking for Patrick, but they search through, it feels like multiple times or something, because then they both come across the same door and there's blood leading up to it. So somehow Gary fought in the amount of time it took them to find where Patrick might be, Gary crashed through the fence, walked through the tiger's kind of area, fought the tiger, and then made it back up to the room without them knowing.
Apparently so.
Get Patrick and hold him hostage.
Yeah, and you think they would have spotted him, you know? I mean, he's covered in bloods.
Yeah.
You know, he's got a big gun. You know, I don't want to fat shame anybody, but Gaylord Sertain is a big guy, you know. Probably 250 pounds, I would say, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know. Anyway, he's a big guy. There's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying you notice him, and yeah. So it seems weird, but yeah, Gary manages to out stealth them and have Patrick held at gunpoint, and then. Like, Gary fights Karen again. Well, last time he didn't fight Karen. He's punched her in the face a bunch of times into disturbing effect. And you know, there's no pulling punches when it comes to Gary. But at least this time, she shows some kind of karate moves that she really hasn't shown before. But yeah, like she kicks him a bunch of times. And then manages to get his shotgun from him, and then he smashes him with the shotgun. And again, this is played way more seriously and way more darkly than anything else that's happened in the film, apart from the scene where Gary punched her in the face a bunch of times.
Yeah, and there's no, you know, and so it's weird because it's not the type of movie where it seems like it's lighthearted enough that they're not going to kill anybody. But I don't know, then that scene, it becomes one of those, she just kind of knocks Gary out.
Yeah.
In the same way that, like, okay, so you left Jack and all of them. But, well, then what? I don't know. It doesn't really seem like she really, for somebody as great of a thief as she was and a criminal and all that, she's not really thinking all this stuff through.
No. And again, it kind of all feels like, because the plot said so. She's as smart as the plot wants her to be at certain points and as dumb as the plot wants her to be at other points.
Yeah. Exactly. They get Patrick and they are on the run, and we see that Roy kind of overhears that there was an attempted robbery at the bank and 2 people got away, which they are suspected of having some of the money. And so he hears this and he ends up talking to Karen on the phone where she says, I have Patrick and I can bring him to you. And at the airport, and then her and JT are going to go, basically they're in disguise, they're going to go, like, you know, flee the country, and right before she's going to drop off Patrick. But they see that, you know, they're wanted and the cops are there kind of searching for them, even though they're in disguise. And so he goes, for some reason, even though she's dropping off Patrick, JT takes Patrick away, and then Karen goes to meet up with Roy, which it seems like it would be switched because I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, again, the plot says so because it's more convenient for what happens. And also, we should mention at this point. Oh no, actually, no. That comes up in a minute. You know, sorry. Some of the scenes get confused in my mind, even reading the notes because like not memorable. But anyway,
Yes.
Yes. So, like, yes, it feels like that should be the other way around. But yes, in terms of plot convenience, it is it's that way around. Because what happens next is that Roy, thinking that she has the money from the bank, attempts to rob her because his car business is going under, and he's broke and he needs the money. And so he tries to rob her. He you mentioned earlier that obviously no safeties in schools in the 90s. Roy has managed to get a gun through the gates into a departure lounge in an airport. So obviously, no security whatsoever in the 90s anywhere, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah, it was a different world, man. It was a different world. But thankfully, because characters are exactly where we need them to be at any particular moment, JT is in the bathroom to punch out Roy. Why? I don't know if he just stopped for a pee or if he knew that Roy was going to attempt to rob her or if Karen managed to give him a secret signal somehow across the airport. I don't know how this works, but basically because we need a happy ending and we need to wrap this shit up, that's what happens.
Yeah, and then so you're kind of up until that scene, there's a scene right before that that really isn't important at all, but we, I guess, kind of fits with the ending, is that he's saying, well, JT keeps telling her you should tell Patrick you're his mother, and she didn't want to bring Patrick with them as they flee the country because she's like, well, this is the first choice I actually get to make for Patrick, and so I want him to have a normal life, and so on. And so after he punches out Roy, they then go meet back up with Patrick, and like JT's basically had enough of it, where he finally just goes, all right, your mother's alive. She's your mother. You love her. There, let's go, or something. And that's how you
actually, yes, we should mention that because movie,
like just tell them because there's no.
Yeah, I think we should also mention in this final segment, again, we've kind of shat on the screenplay quite a lot throughout the episode. But again, we do get a couple of fun JT lines. So in that first conversation you were talking about where, he's saying like, oh, why don't you just take him instead of giving back to Roy? He comes out with this line. When Karen says, at least Roy's his father, at least he'll have a chance for a normal life with him. And JT retorts, normal? What's not normal about getting on an airplane with your mom and going down to Rio with $3 million? And then just before the reveal, which is like really perfunctorily done, even though it's had all this build up, it's just kind of really rushed. And then Patrick's like, oh, okay, cool. You're my mom. Let's hug. JT has this line. That's right. She's your mama. You're her son. We're rich. Let's go to Rio. Which again, is pretty fun.
Yeah. And it seems like that would be the ending. But then they get on the plane. Like that even seems like a quick wrap up, but then they get on the plane in, what looks like maybe first class. And JT says that he wants to, can he sit with her mom for a bit? Patrick moves up the seat or whatever. And so JT and her sitting there with, it's like the champagne, they're wearing their disguises, and he's talking about, that nothing has ever gone right in his life, but here he is, with money and with the most beautiful woman he knows, or whatever. It's supposed to be romantic, and then you hear the cops coming up, and you think, oh, well, they've been had, and that's what. But because we know the movie, and we kind of, I don't know, there no tension feels like it should be there, even though there's a part of it's. And then the cops finally, they stop the plane, they enter, and she's about to give herself up, and then JT is going to tell her that he loves her, and then it turns out that the cops just had an organ donor, or some sort of organ for organ donation, and then they laugh and they hug, and then the plane flies off, and that even feels really quickly wrapped up.
Yeah, everything about the ending feels quite weird and abrupt. It's just kind of like, yes, we've run out of story. We don't quite know what to do. We're going to have this one last moment of fake tension before you get the happy ending that you all know that you're going to get. Okay, sure, movie. I think the movie could have, even though it would have been abrupt because, the kind of reveal to Patrick feels abrupt, and it feels just kind of so easily accepted, and just kind of we've been building up this whole movie for this, but it's just oh, okay, cool, done. But you could have ended on that line with GT about let's go to Rio, and that's kind of at least a fun line to end on. And it's weird as well because it feels like that would have dovetailed with the Stop or My Mum Will Shoot, which ends on the kind of he killed his mother, that, which also ends at an airport. These guys, man.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
They love airports.
Yep. They love airports and making formulaic movies that are the most formulaic versions of the movies that they're supposed to be. Then we had the most formulaic mismatched buddy comedy, and now we've had the most formulaic heist movie. All apologies to Mr. William Osborne and Mr. William Davies. I'm sure you're good people, and one of them, even co-wrote How to Train Your Dragon, so not did good stuff as well. But these were not the high points of anybody's career. It's not the high point of their career or Russell McKay's career or any of the actors involved. Even the score is quite generic, and I looked up who did the score because I was again, I kind of thought it's probably just some gun for hire composer, and then I was no, it's Brad Fiedel who did the music for Terminator and Terminator 2, and it's done other cool shit. So it's just not the high point for anybody. Everybody's it's a lazy Sunday afternoon movie where it's just we got through it.
Except within Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, where there's the one PA or production designer, somebody who's just so proud.
Yeah. Once again, this one random crew member. We don't know who that crew member was. But the assistant to Kim Basinger or something is I remember back in '93, I was on the set of The Real McCoy. Still talk about those days, those heady days.
Yeah.
Oh dear. I suppose we should say that, again, this is not the most terrible movie in the world. There is the odd thing here and there to like about. It's just much like Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. It is bogged down by its sheer genericness, and also the kind of. There's no real through line to the character of Karen. She kind of, sometimes she's really meek, sometimes she's really badass, sometimes she's really clever, sometimes she's quite dumb. it's all kind of mixed bag. There's different parts of the movie where she feels like a different character, and yeah, and then tonally it can be quite weird. It moves in between this light-hearted crime caper romp and this, more serious drama, and then we've kind of talked again about those two weird moments of violence that don't really fit with the other violence in the movie. It's just, we got through it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it is way better than, Step Around While Shoot. And, watching it again, if I watched it outside of this podcast and just came across it, where I didn't have to kind of, wasn't breaking down it scene by scene, I'd probably, it'd still be forgettable. It'd still be whatever, but I'd probably just, it'd be one of those, maybe never mind. I was going to say a 2-star movie, but maybe, at least maybe not fully that, but it'd be something where you'd kind of be like, okay, whatever.
I think it kind of is like a mediocre 2-star movie.
It was what it was. Yeah.
Like I genuinely think Stop or My Mouth Shoot is like a kind of, 1.5 star disaster. And I don't, yeah. I think this movie is more just kind of mediocre rather than like an out and out awful,
horrible.
Yeah. But hopefully, if you're this is your first episode, you've still enjoyed listening to us moan about this movie. If this is your first episode listening, we don't always moan like this. Sometimes we're way more chipper. Often we're way more chipper than this, and sometimes you get some deeper cinematic analysis. That doesn't happen often. Usually it's just us kind of riffing and joking. But certainly you can hear us in many other episodes in a way more upbeat mood. And check out those episodes. Hopefully you've still enjoyed this episode with us just kind of ranting throughout the episode. And also, if you are offended by swearing, I realize I said the F word quite a lot in the first kind of half hour of this episode, and so sorry, that might seem excessive to some. So apologies for that. Anyway, we need to wrap this one up. So Craig, give the usual social media details, and then I'll close the book on this one.
Yes. And actually, if you are just listening to for the first time, surprisingly, this is we don't have a lot of swearing, I've realized, in this, traditionally in this podcast, despite some of the stuff we've watched. But I'll go into my details of, if you want to look me up, I am on Twitter at Craig Dram, DRAHEIM, or Instagram at Craig.Dram if you'd like to follow me. Or I am also part of Bloodhound Picks, which is spelled PIX, and you can find that on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or the website bloodhoundpicks.com, where we are a podcast that look at older, obscure, and independent kind of horror movies, and then we'll also sometimes interview and highlight artists within the horror community, be it reviewers from bloggers, podcasters, filmmakers, or even scholars, or whatever it may be, and kind of talking about what it's like working in the horror industry in this kind of modern age, especially with the pandemic. But yeah, if you're interested, give me a follow.
And I recommend all our listeners check out Bloodhound Picks and all that great stuff. If you want to listen to me talk more, you can on my other show, New Horror Express, which is I interview indie horror directors, writers, actors, all that kind of stuff. It's a weekly show that's it was a weekly show. It's gone back to fortnightly for now. But you can check that out. You can contact that show on Twitter at New Horror EXP. New Horror Express also has a Facebook, so you can check out our Facebook. And I also have a website, newhorrorexpress.com, which you can check that out. If you want to talk to me personally, you can as well. You can hit me up on Twitter at ScottMurphy85. Or if you want to hit up this show specifically, you can at 90s_all. But so that's all the social media details. Also, before we wrap this one up, if you do like the show, if you've listened, you liked it, then the best way you can support the show is to rate, review, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. That would help us out greatly. And if you could make those reviews 5 stars, that would be really helpful, because otherwise the algorithm thinks we're shit. I know it's strange. We live in a strange world, but that's how it is. So 5 stars. Thank you very much. And also, if you really enjoy the show, please tune in again next week when we will be talking all about Batman Forever. And we're looking forward to that one because we've mentioned it in like 5 other episodes. So it's like the most heavily trailed episode we've ever had. So definitely check that one out. But anyway, that is all for this time. Until then, see ya.